Here to break it down with me is Josh Hammer. He's a senior editor-at-large at Newsweek, host of The Josh Hammer Show, and senior legal counsel at Article 3 Project. Sir, thank you so much for joining. The move and the request for the jury to ask Judge Juan Merchan to reread instructions is particularly interesting. Only 5 hours into the deliberations, and they've made this request. Can we read anything into that, sir?
So, first of all, with the huge caveat that at this point we're doing exactly that. We're just trying to sift tea leaves and trying to kind of draw out hints here. So with that huge caveat stipulated, yes, I do think that this is an encouraging sign for Donald Trump. You saw a lot of people, a lot of political liberals, a lot of Democrat elected officials, the whole kind of clown posse on MSNBC. You saw a lot of these folks who were kind of just exuding like their false confidence and their braggadocio, saying, oh, we're going to get a quick conviction. The jury will go back there. They'll pop out of those doors 20, 30 minutes later. The nefarious orange man is going to be in an orange jumpsuit in Rikers Island sooner rather than later. So already that's been dismissed, right? I mean, already the jury has now taken many hours of the day, and we're going to a second day of deliberations. They want to hear additional testimony from David Pecker, from Michael Cohen, to rehear some parts of the testimony. They want to hear the jury instructions again. So it's actually, it is encouraging. Now, I don't want to give false hope as well. I mean, we are ultimately trying to prognosticate based on some tea leaves here. So it could still come back with a conviction, but it does indicate a bare minimum that the jury is having a tough time as of now reaching unanimity, and obviously unanimity is required, or at least some version of unanimity is required given these very bizarre jury instructions and the fact that we don't actually know what the in furtherance of tack-on predicate offense is, but some version of unanimity is required for conviction. So as of now, if I were a Trump lawyer, I'd be pretty happy.
Well, Josh, I want to dive into what you just said specifically about the oddity of the jury instructions. Now, obviously, everything boils down to the second crime that's necessary in order to elevate this misdemeanor of a falsification of a business record into a Class E felony. There was much ado about the jury instructions regarding the second crime. What did you make of the reports coming out of the courthouse regarding that?
So, I mean, I am just dumbfounded. I am just astounded where we are when it comes to jury instructions. So let's turn back the clock a little bit here. So 4 criminal prosecutions against Trump. Alvin Bragg, which is this case, he was the first out of the gate over a year ago now, April 2023. He had the 34-count indictment. I remember reading it like it were yesterday. And my very first thought as a lawyer after reading this was, well, where is the actual second crime? Because the underlying fraudulent bookkeeping charge in New York State has, well, first of all, it's just a misdemeanor. It's not even a felony. But it also has a 2-year statute of limitations. So that statute of limitations would have told way back in 2018 or so. But at that time, I was like, okay, so presumably they're going to tell us before we get to trial. And trial starts. They still haven't told us. Now, here we are. We're literally waiting for the jury to give us a verdict. And we literally don't know what the prosecution's theory of the case is. I mean, to say that this is clown car, banana republic stuff, I think would probably be optimistic of anything. I go back to my criminal law class, my first year of law school back at the University of Chicago. You learn in black letter criminal law, every criminal law has what lawyers call an actus reus, which is the physical act. That's where you pull the trigger or whatnot in a homicide case. And then the mens rea, the subjective mentality. How in the world can you possibly expect 12 jurors, 10 of whom are not lawyers, there's 2 lawyers on this jury, how in the world can you expect them to actually get a verdict where they haven't been told any of this? They don't know what the crime is. They don't know what the actus reus, the mens rea. The whole thing stinks to high heaven here. The Trump lawyers fought a good fight. They tried to get specific intent to commit a federal campaign finance election law in the jury instructions. That was the correct move on their part. Merchan should have ruled with them. But obviously, Merchan is a left-wing hack, as we have seen play out over the course of this trial. So now we wait and see, I guess.
We're certainly in the waiting and seeing process, but ultimately the longer this goes on, common sense certainly suggests that could be better for President Trump and his chances of avoiding a guilty conviction, of course, on all the counts. We'll talk about the possibility of a hung jury for a minute, Josh, as we speak. What would the implications be if a single juror, or potentially even 2, decides to hold out and say, hold a minute, this isn't going to reach the standards of beyond a reasonable doubt? What would that specifically mean for the trial moving forward?
So this has been my cautiously optimistic prediction the whole time, actually. I've actually always said that a hung jury is slightly more likely than a conviction. I continue to believe that, although it's admittedly a very close call, and I definitely don't want to give false hope or anything. But all it takes is one. Literally all it takes is one juror, and you get a hung jury, you get a mistrial. Realistically speaking, you're not going to get a full-out unanimous acquittal. It's just not going to happen here. That's not the nature of this jury pool in New York City, obviously. But a hung jury is a distinct possibility, and what that means is that the prosecution could decide to retry the case. They could decide to retry the case next week, next month. It's going to depend on how eager, how zealous they are. It's going to depend on Judge Merchan's calendar, on his docket, things like that. I predict that if you have one or two jurors who get this thing to a hung jury, that Alvin Bragg will retry this case at least once. And that obviously is going to be a whole nother spectacle. It's going to be a whole nother summer of Donald Trump deprived of his right to be on the campaign trail in Pennsylvania and just more time chained down to Juan Merchan's New York City courtroom.
Well, Josh, 60 seconds. Are there anything you're looking for, anything our viewers should be paying attention to tomorrow as court resumes at 9:30 Eastern? Are there any tells, any signs? What should they be looking out for?
Yeah, I think basically just the more time they take and the more, notes to the judge they have, the more requests to hear more testimony, the more time they're basically stalling. It's reasonable to infer from that they're having a tough time reaching a unanimous consensus. I mean, it's kind of just common sense, right? I mean, if they all went in the room and they all knew that he was guilty, they would have given us that verdict many hours ago. Here we are at the end of Wednesday, and there's no verdict yet. So just the longer this goes on, the longer they stall. Again, on the margins, that's beneficial for Donald Trump.
Josh Hammer, senior editor at Large Newsweek, host of the Josh Hammer Show, and senior legal counsel at the Article 3 Project. Sir, thank you so much for